Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in amma ba'd. Wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to continue with this story of this great Imam, the Imam of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, Imam Ahmad, with the life and trials of the Imam of Ahl Sunnah, part 3. We left off last week, we're talking about Al-Mihna, the trial that came during the time of Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah. Last week we mentioned what Imam Zahabi said in his Siyar A'lam al-Nubala, that كان الناس أمة واحد, that the Ummah was one, ودينهم قائما في خلافة Abu Bakr wa Umar, and that the people were upon the deen that was established in the Khilafah of Abu Bakr and Umar. And then Imam Zahabi, rahimahullah, he mentioned that there came the situation of the camel, in which Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she was upset because of the killing Uthman radiallahu anhu, and she wanted Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was a Khalifa at the time, to take revenge on those who Uthman. And we mentioned that Ali, he was deliberate. He wanted to make sure that he had all the information he needed before he acted upon the situation. And then we said there came the situation with Ali and Muawiyah. And then from that, the Khawarij came forth, revolting against Ali ibn Abi Talib, claiming that no one had a right to judge but Allah Azza wa Jal, when they said, إِنَّ الْحُكْمُ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ, claiming that Ali was a kafir because he took part in rulership in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone had a right to judge. And then we mentioned that, or Imam Zahabi mentioned that from that there came the appearance of the Rawafid and the Nawasib. And we mentioned who these groups were from the Shia. And then he said, وفي آخر الزمان الصحابة ظهرت القدرية. And he mentioned that the Qadariyya had appeared, that those who deny the Qadr of Allah. And then he said Al-Mu'tazila in Basra. And then he mentioned Mu'tazila. We mentioned who the Mu'tazili were and how they started. And then he said Al-Jahmiyya wa Mujassima in Khurasan. And he mentioned the Jahmiyya and the Mujassima. We mentioned who these groups were. We kind of broke down some of their main points in what they believe in. And thereafter, he mentioned that, of course, the Jahmiyya were the main enemies of Ahl Sunnah at the time. And he said that they came with Khalq al-Quran, and that the Quran was created. And we said that we know the belief of Ahl Sunnah, the Quran, Kalam Allah, wa laysa makhluq. And he mentioned that there passed the rulership of Harun al-Rashid and Amin. And then it came to Ma'mun. And then we said that, or Imam Zahabi mentioned that he was affected by the Mu'tazila, that he خلطه قوم من المعتزلة فحسنه له قول من خلق القرآن, that Ma'mun, he mixed with the people from the Mu'tazila, the deviant group who deny the attributes of Allah, and they beautified the statement of the Quran being created. We also mentioned in the class before that, the very beginning of the introduction, part 1, that Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, he sought hadith at the age of 15. And that he had memorized over 1 million ahadith of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We said that he had piety, and that he had fear of Allah Azza wa Jal, And then we said he was a tall man who was tan. And that Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, he had fear of no one but Allah Azza wa Jal. And we also mentioned that, or we mentioned from his teachers, who his teachers were. And we also mentioned some from his students and some of those who just narrated from him, like Bukhari, who narrated one hadith from Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah. And we mentioned also Abu Dawood, rahimahullah, also narrated about one hadith from Imam Ahmad. And we mentioned Muslim and Tirmidhi and other than them who narrated from this great Imam. So now, today, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to look at the mihna, the trial of Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, a little closer. So Imam Zahabi continues by saying, قال صالح ابن أحمد سمعت أبي يقول لما دخلنا على إسحاق ابن إبراهيم للمحنة. So Salih, the son of Ahmad, rahimahumullah, he said, I heard my father say, when we entered upon Ishaq ibn Ibrahim, and he tried to read to us, he goes on to say, قرأ علينا كتاب الذي سار إلى طراسوس. He tried to read upon us the proclamation of the one who had gone to Tarasus, يعني المأمون, meaning Ma'mun. فكان فيما, he said, and what was in it, قرأ علينا ليس كمثله شيء. So he said that if what he read out to us was the verse where Allah said, ليس كمثله شيء. And also, وهو خالق كل شيء. And the first verse is the 42nd surah of the Quran, the 11th ayah. And the second is the 6th surah, the 102nd ayah. So, as you can see, they're trying to prove that the Quran, Allah, is created. Can they say, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ? There's nothing like Allah. And they say, وَهُوَ خَالِقُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. And that He created all things. So they're saying because He created all things, also His speech or the Quran is created. So then he goes on to say, Salih, he said that his father said, فَقُلْتُ. So I said, وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. And He is all hearing and all seeing. Because one of the things that the Mu'tazila and the Jahmiyyah do, that they bring the first part of the verse, but then they cover up the second part of it. So they say, there's nothing like Allah. But then he also go, and they say from here, like the Ash'ari, they consider Ahl Sunnah to be Al-Mujassima. And we mentioned Al-Mujassima last week. Those who say that Allah is like His creation by attributing to Allah the likeness of His creation. We say that Allah has a hand and the meaning is the same, but not the how of it. And to make takyif, to ask how, we say it's from the way of Ahl Sunnah to say this is a bid'ah. Because we mentioned the story of Imam Malik, rahimahullah, that great Imam of Medina. When the man came to Imam Malik, he said, Ya Abu Abdurrahman, Ya Abu Abdullah, Ar-Rahman istawa al-arsh. So the man came to Imam Malik and said, O father of Abdullah, Ar-Rahman istawa al-arsh. The most merciful ascended over the throne. فَكَيْفَ istawa? But how is the ascending? Imam Malik, the great Imam of Dar Hijrah in Medina, he said, Al-istiwa ma'alum. Wa kayf majhul. Wa as'alu anhu bid'ah. So the great Imam Malik said that the ascending is known. The how of it is unknown. And to ask about it is the bid'ah. Then it said that he ordered the man to be kicked out of the study circle. And he said, I see you no more as being an innovator. So we know that Allah has attributes, but they're not like His creation. But you see that inscription that was by Ma'mun, when they entered upon Ishaq ibn Ibrahim, and he tried to read to them, he said, "Laysa kamithlihi shay." So he brought the first part of the verse and trying to prove that the Quran is created. Trying to prove that the Quran is created because there's nothing like Allah. And then they brought the other verse, وَهُوَ خَالِقُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ, and He's creator of all things. So therefore, the Quran is a thing, is outside of Allah. So therefore, it's created. And Allah is the only thing that's not created. But they left off the other verse. So Salih, he said, his father said, and he, وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ, to prove that Allah has attributes. But the first part of the verse shows that the attributes are not like His creation. So then he goes on to say, قَالَ صَالِحٌ ثُمَّ امْتُهِينَ الْقَوْمِ. Then Salih said, then the people were tried. And he goes on to say, and those who refused to consent were threatened that they would be imprisoned. فَجَابَ قَوْمٌ جَمِيعًا غَيْرِ أَرْبَعَةٍ. And everybody accepted except four people. Except four people. He said one was Abi, my father. Then Muhammad ibn Nuh. Then Al-Qurarari. Then Hassan ibn Sajjada. These are the four that did not accept that the Quran was created. And remember we said that although the rest of the people around Imam Ahmad, Bukhari, Shafi'i, Yahya bin Ma'in, Ali bin Madini, وكذلك, that they did not accept it as a belief, but they used a principle from the Quran. And we mentioned the story of Ammar ibn Yasir, when his parents were martyred, and they came to him, the Mushrikeen pagans, and said, did you denounce Islam? And he said, I denounced Islam. And then when he seen the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had his head down in shame. And he said, how can I look at you? And the Messenger said, did you denounce it with your tongue or with your heart? He said, only with my tongue. He said, he's full of Iman. So ulama mentioned this principle that you could denounce Islam out of fear that your life may be taken. But it's better and more virtuous to not denounce it and to endure the harm. But if you can't endure the harm, you can say it only with your tongue to save your life, but not with your heart in true belief. And this is what those Salaf around Imam Ahmad did. But Imam Ahmad, he was on a different level. This is why he's the Imam of Ahl Sunnah. So he said these four, they did not accept that the Quran was created. Then he goes on to say, ثُمَّ أَجَابَ هَذَيْنِ. Then, two of them accepted it. Two of them consented. But of course, not, as I mentioned, out of belief. وَبَقِيَ Abi wa Muhammad. And he said, it remained his father and Muhammad. And then he said, then they were ordered to be in prison for some days because they did not accept the Quran being created. And although they knew that they could have utilized that principle, they stood firm and they said, Al-Quran kalamullah wa laysa makhluq. So then he said, ثُمَّ جَاءَ كِتَابٌ مِّن طُرَاسُسٍ بِحَمْلُهُمَا مُقَيِّدِينِ. Then he said, Zamayin. Then he said that, so therefore, then they were ordered, the order came from Tarasus, that they were to be brought in chains together. That they were to be brought in chains together. that they were to be brought in chains together. So because they refused, Imam Ahmad and Muhammad ibn Nuh, and as I mentioned, Muhammad ibn Nuh was a young man. He was a young man. Give me 1 second, please. I'm sorry. Now, so the order came from Tarasus that they were to be brought in chains. And then he goes on to say, Imam Zahabi, that Abbas al-Darri سمعت أبا جعفر الأنباري يقول لما حمل أحمد إلى مأمون. So then he says that Abbas ibn Dori said, I heard Ja'far al-Anbari say, when Ahmed was taken off to al-Ma'mun, he goes on to say, I heard of it. And then he said, so I crossed the Euphrates. I crossed the Euphrates. فإذا هو, he said, فإذا هو جالس في الخان فسلمت عليه. Then he said, فقال يا أبا جعفر. So then he says that I crossed the Euphrates and came to him and found him sitting in a small room. And I greeted him with a salam. And he said, O Abu Jafar. He says, تُعَيَّنَتَ فَقُلْتُ يَا هَذَا أَنْتَ الْيَوْمِ رَأْسُ. And he goes on to say that, and I found him sitting in a small room, and I greeted him with salam, and he said, O Abu Jafar, you have troubled yourself. So I said, today you are a head. You are a head, meaning the head of the people, who the people follow. For wallahi, so by Allah, he said, by Allah, he said, do not respond illa khalq al-Quran. Do not respond to the Quran being created. Do not respond to the Quran being recreated. Then the rest of the people will consent to it. But if you refuse, وَإِنْ أَنْتَ لَمْ تُجِبْ, he said, if you refuse to respond, then many people will refuse. And even if the man does not kill you, he said, that even if the man does not kill you, then he said, you will still die. Meaning eventually you will die. Eventually you're going to die no matter what. He said, so, in lam yuqtulka fa innaka tamut. La bud min al-maut. Fattaqullah wa la tadab. So fear Allah and do not respond to him. La tujib. So fear Allah and do not respond. So he said, then he goes on to say, excuse me. So Ahmed began to weep. He began to cry and say, just as Allah wills. So he said, he began to cry, and he says, وَهُوَ يُقُولُ مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ. And then so Zahabi goes on to say, وَقَالَ Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Bawshanji جعلوا يذكرون Aba Abdullah Biraqqa. So he said, then Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Bawshanji, he said, in Raqqa, which is a place in Iraq, he said, they begin to remind Abu Abdullah, meaning Imam Ahmad, about the allowance. So listen to this now. They start to remind him. This is the point I was talking about earlier, the principle. They start to remind him about the allowance of verbally affirming to save oneself. And the reports, the hadith of Khabbab, إِنَّ مَنْ كَانَ قَبَلَكُمْ كَانَ يَنْشَرُ أَحَدُهُمْ بِالْمَنْشَارِ لَا يُسَدُّهُ ذَلِكَ عَنْ دِينِهِ. So then they reminded him of the hadith of a Khabbab. where it said that amongst those who came before you, a man who will be sawn in half. But that would not cause him to abandon his religion. So when they started to remind Imam Ahmad of the allowance of him saying that you can pronounce that the Quran is created. You have a principle with this. No fear. There's a principle. It doesn't compromise your deen. All you have to do, like us, is say the Quran is created out of this principle. Imam Ahmad, he said to them, when he said this, he said to them, he brought to them the narration of Khabbab. When he said, and listen what he said. He said, what would you do with this hadith? كيف تسعون بحديث خباب? What would you do with it? What would you do with this hadith where Khabbab said, إن من كان قبلكم كان ينشر أحدهم بالمنشار لا يصده ذلك عن دينه. So he brought his proof. So other words saying, yeah, I know I can use that principle, but what are you going to do with this hadith of Khabbab, where he mentioned that, and this hadith is found in Ahmad in his own Musnad. And as I mentioned, remember I said that Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, he memorized over 1 million hadith. And he said he did not memorize the hadith until he implemented the hadith. And we gave a proof last week of how he's implementing it by what he was doing, and we give another proof now how he's implementing another hadith. Where he said that narration of Khabbab, that's in Bukhari, and in Abu Dawood, and in his Musnad, in Ahmad's book, وَكَذَلِكَ وَغَيْرِهِمَا. And he said that, in relation to that, so he said, Imam Ahmad said, there was a people before you who a man was sawn in half, split right down the middle. But that would not cause him to abandon his religion. So Imam Ahmad said, this is what I'm standing upon. Yes, there's a principle. You can take it. But I'm standing upon this hadith of Khabbab, that إِنَّ مَنْ كَانَ قَبْلَكُمْ كَانَ يَنْشَرُ أَحَدُهُمْ بِالْمِنْشَارِ لَا يُسُدُّهُ ذَلِكَ عَنْ دِينِهِ. I'm standing on this hadith, that there was a man that came before you, who was split right down the middle in half, but that would not cause that man to abandon his deen. So then they were going to say after that, when Imam Ahmad brought this to them, so we gave up hope regarding him, meaning that he would take that principle. That he would take that principle. And he said, Imam Ahmad said, he said, Laystu adali. He said, I do not mind. I do not mind about prison. I don't care about it. He said, why? Since it and my house are the same. Nor about being beheaded, but rather I fear the trial of the whip. So Imam Ahmad said, I don't mind about prison. He said, because ma huwa munzali ila wahid. Because it in my house is one. It's one. And I don't feel wala qadalin bi sayf. I don't feel that either. And you keep in mind, the Prophet ﷺ said that the dunya jinnatul kafir. It's a paradise of the kafir. But what? Sijin of the Muslim. A prison of the believer. So, this is how we understand Imam Ahmad said his house and the prison is the same. Because the Messenger said anyway, the dunya is a prison for the believer. It's a prison. So how can the believer be satisfied with the comfort of this dunya when in reality he's in a prison, she's in a prison? We need to get back to our true home. And it's expensive. The jinn is expensive. So Imam Ahmad understood that. So he said, I don't mind being beheaded or in prison, because the prison in my house is one, the same. What I fear is the whip. And then he goes on to say that, so a fellow prisoner heard him, a fellow prisoner heard him. And he said to Imam Ahmad, said, La alik ya Abu Abdullah. He said, to Imam Ahmad, don't be concerned. Oh Abu Abdullah. He said, why? Because it would only take 2 lashes. He said 2 lashes. That's all it would take. And then after that he says, ثُمَّ لَا تَجْرِي أَيْنَ يُقَعُ الْبَاقِيَ. Then you won't even notice the rest of them as they strike you. After you get 2 lashes, the rest of the strikes you won't even notice them anymore. So it was as if he said he felt peace because of this. And then he goes on to say, قال صالح ابن أحمد حمل أبي ومحمد ابن نوح من بغداد وقيدا. Then he said that Salih, the son of Ahmed, said, my father and Muhammad ibn Nuh were taken from Baghdad in chains. So then he goes on to say, so we went out with them to Al-Anbar. And he said, then Abu Bakr al-Ahwal asked my father, O Abu Abdullah, if you are threatened with the sword, will you consent? He said, La, no, I will not. Then they were taken, and I heard my father say, we came to Ar-Rahba, and we left there in the middle of the night. We left there in the middle of the night. Jawf al-Layl, in the middle of the night. And then he goes on to say, and a man came up to us and said, which one of you, فَأَرَدَ لَنَا رَجُلٌ فَقَالَ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْمَدْ ibn Hanbal فَقِيلَ لَهُ هَذَا. So then he goes on to say, a man came up to him and said, which one of you is Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal? So it was said to him, this one. So he said to the camel drivers, فقال للجمل جمال على رسلك. He said to the camel drivers, steady on. And then he said, O you, how will it harm you if you are killed here and you enter the paradise? That you enter the paradise. And then he said, I entrust you to Allah's safekeeping. And he departed. So I asked about him, and it was said to him, he is a Bedouin Arab from the tribe of Rabi'a, who makes clothes of fur in the desert. He is called Jabir ibn Amir. Sorry. Jabir ibn Amir. And it is said he was a good person. وَذَكَرْ بِخَيْرٍ. Then he goes on to say, Ahmad ibn Abi al-Hawari حدثنا إبراهيم ibn Abdullah قال Ahmad ibn Hanbal. He said then, Ibrahim ibn Abdullah said that Ahmad ibn Hanbal said, I did not hear a word since I fell into this affair stronger than the sand of the Bedouin who spoke to me at Rahba, Polk. He had said, Ya Ahmad, O Ahmad, if you die upon the truth, mutta shaheedan, you would die as a shaheed. And if you live, you will live in a praiseworthy state. And then he goes on to say, وَقَالَ صَالِحْ Ahmad. Now this is the time at the death of Ma'mun. And he was succeeded by Al-Mu'tasim. So now the death of Ma'mun is coming. And then Mu'tasim is coming. Because Imam Ahmad, he went through several leaders. It wasn't just one leader. And he had crowds at each advent of a leader. So Salih ibn Ahmad, the son of Imam Ahmad, he said, my father had said, Then we proceeded to Adana. Adana. Right? With a fath. And this is a place I'm taking somewhere in Iraq, and Allah Ta'ala A'lam. And he said that, and left also in the middle of the night, Jawful Layl, in the middle of the night. فَفُتِحَ لَنَا بَابُهَا, and the door opened for us. And the door opened for us. Good news. It said, good news. The man has died. قد مات رجل يعني المأمون. قال أبي كنت أدعو الله أن لا أراه. And then he said, my father said, and I supplicated to Allah that I should not meet him. I should not see him. I should not see him. And I'm sorry, I think I covered this part last week, but nonetheless, the reminder benefits the believer. Then he goes on to say, وقال صالح. Then Salih said, لما صدر أبي ومحمد ibn Nuh إلى طراسوس. Salih ibn Ahmad said, then when my father Muhammad ibn Nuh came to Tarasus, he said, رُدَّ فِي أَقْيَادَهُمَا, that they were then sent back to Raqqa in chains. And he said they were humilan fi safina. They were on a boat. They were placed on a boat. And so when they reached this place, another place, A'ana, this one is with an Ain. The first one is with an Aleph. First one is with an Aleph. Adana. And this one is with an Ain. A'ana. He said when they reached this particular place, and it's between Raqqa somewhere, like in Iraq. When they reached this place, he said that Tawafi Muhammad. Muhammad died. Wa fuka tayuduhu. Wasalla alayhi abi. So Muhammad had died, and his chains were removed. And my father prayed over him. So Muhammad ibn Nuh, that young man who was brave enough to be with Imam Ahmad, he had died on the journey as they being moved from place to place in heavy chains, from place to place. Because they stood firm on the belief of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that the Quran is the Kalam of Allah and is not created. That one issue of Aqidah, that one thing, that one issue put them to trial. It put Imam Ahmad to trial to be imprisoned. Sometimes one place for this amount of time, another place for this amount of time, being lashed on his back several times. Man after man standing in line to whip him. So yet he didn't give up. He didn't give up. This is an example. This is why he's called Imam of Ahl Sunnah. So he goes on and says, وقال Hanbal, and his Hanbal is the cousin of Imam Ahmad. قال Abu Abdullah. He said, Abu Abdullah said that ما رأيت أحدا على حدث سنه وقدري علمه أقوم بأمر الله من Muhammad ibn Nuh. He said that, so Hanbal said that Abu Abdullah said, meaning Imam Ahmad, I did not see anyone along with this young man, meaning like Muhammad ibn Nuh, because as I said, he was a young man, in knowledge, who better stood firm for Allah's sake than Muhammad ibn Nuh. So Imam Ahmad gave tazkiyah for Muhammad ibn Nuh, who he said he did not see a young man who stood firmer than him, except this man Muhammad ibn Nuh. Then he goes on to say, and I hope that his actions were sealed with good. لأرجو أن يكونوا قد كتم له khair. He said that I hope that his actions were sealed with good. قال لي that يوم يا أبا عبد الله الله إنك لست مثلي أنت رجل يقتدى بك. So then he goes on to say that one day he said to me, "Oh Abu Abdullah," meaning Muhammad ibn Nuh, for Allah, you are not the same as me. You're not the same as me. He said, "Anta rajulun yuqtada bik." You are a man who is followed. You are a man who is followed. Then he goes on to say, the people stretch their necks towards you to see what you will do. So this is a young man telling Imam Ahmad. He says, فَاتَّقِ اللَّهِ وَإِثْبُتْ لِأَمْرِ اللَّهِ أو نحو هذا فمات وصليت عليه ودفنته. SubhanAllah. So he said, this young man said to him, Imam Ahmad, so fear Allah and be firm for the sake of Allah, or something like this, he said. Then he died. Famat wasalaytu alayhi, and then we prayed upon him and we buried him. And I think he said, Athanna qala bi'a'na. And I think he said they prayed upon him in al-a'na. Then qala Salih, wasara abi ila Baghdad. And he said that my father came to Baghdad. But did he come like a normal person? No. He came in chains. This Imam of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. He came in chains. It's because of his firmness and his commitment to Allah Azza wa Jal that we probably can say that we are upon the way of Imam Ahmad, that we are upon the way of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, that we are upon the minhaj of the Salaf. Because the ulama say that Islam was saved twice. Once in the battle of apostasy, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And the second time, in the mihna of Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah. So this great Imam, he suffered for the sake of the deen of Allah Azza wa Jalla. Although he could have took the principle of saying that the Quran was created not with belief, but for the mere fact of just saving himself from certain death or imprisonment. Imam Ahmad chose to stand upon the hadith of Khabbab. And he made it clear when he told the people, what are you going to do? The other people, the hadith of Khabbab. إِنَّ مَنْ كَانَ قَبْلَكُمْ كَانَ يَنْشَرُ أَحَدُهُمْ بِالْمِنْشَارِ لَا يُصَدُّهُ ذَلِكَ عَنْ دِينِهِ. Hadith of Bukhari, Abu Dawood, in Ahmad's compilation hadith, as he mentioned. So he stood firm upon this. There are people who came before you were split in half, but did not give up their deen. How many of us, أَيْنَ نَحْنُ مِنْ هَؤُلَاءِ? Where are we at? Where are we at compared to them? How do we stand firm when our job is threatening us with losing a paycheck, a cut in pay, if we don't shave our beards? And we fear the people, not fear Allah Azza wa Jalla, make all kinds of excuses. Instead of having tawakkul ala Allah. Imam Ahmad was by himself, with being lashed, and beaten, and imprisoned, and humiliated, and put in chains from this place to that place, on the riding beast about to fall off, and the chains were so heavy. With a companion who was with him, who he's seen who died in the journey. But yet he still didn't give up. For the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jalla, he took the most virtuous path. And said, I don't care if I'm beheaded. I don't care about the prison because it's like my house to me. But look at us. We're so comfortable, especially in the West. We have everything that the heart can desire. Ice cream, air conditioning, heat, a nice automobile, a nice family. We're close with them. We're with them. We can't even go to work without missing them. But look at Imam Ahmad. look at Imam Ahmad, imprisoned, away from all of the comfort, but yet and still, it didn't make him give up his deen. So he said that this young man, he had encouraged him. He said these words before he died. How many Muslims say words of sin as they're dying? As we've heard Muslims who would die say, give me another cigarette. وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ. Give me another cigarette. But this young man, Muhammad Nuh, he said, فَاتَّقِ اللَّهِ وَإِثْبُتْ لِأَمْرِ اللَّهِ أو نحو هذا. فَمَات. Then he died. He said, fear Allah and remain firm upon the command of Allah. Then he died. So then Salih, he goes on to say, and my father was taken to Baghdad in chains and remained a few days in a place called Yasiriya. In a place called Yasariya. And then he said, ثم حبس في دار اكتريت عند دار أمارة. And then he said that then he was imprisoned in a house hired by the house of Umara. ثم حول إلى. Then he said, then he went to the main prison. He said, to the main prison, or the general prison. It was on Darb al-Mawsiliya, on Mawsiliya Street, if you can say. And then he said, I used to lead the prisoners in the prayer, and I was chained. Kuntu usalli yu'ahal al-sijn. وأنا مقيد. I used to lead the people in prison, and I was chained. Then he said, فَلَمَّا كَانَ فِي رَمَضَانِ. And then Ramadan came in the year, he said, تَسَ عَشَرَ. And when we said earlier, they said the last date and left off the front date. But we understand this to be 219 after the Hijrah. Because he was born in 164. Sometimes they would leave off the first number and it's missing the last two numbers. So this is in 219 after the Hijrah, he said. He prayed and led the prisoners in prayer, in chains. And then he said, and then in Ramadan in 219, he said that was after the death of al-Ma'muti, about 14 months. He said about 14 months. That was the death, that was after his death. I'm sorry, Ma'mun. After the death of Ma'mun. Bi arba'a ashara shahr. So he said that was after the death of Mahmoud by 14 months. Then he said, after that, I was moved to the house of Ishaq ibn Ibrahim, the deputy of Baghdad. So you see, they moved from place to place to place, to be in prison, place to place. And then he said, Yani Naib Baghdad. So he was moved to the house of Ishaq ibn Ibrahim, the deputy of Baghdad. And he said, وَأَمَّا Hanbal, as for Hanbal, he says that Abu Abdullah was imprisoned in the house of Imara in Baghdad. But where was he imprisoned at this time? He was placed, he said, in a stable. In a stable that was in the house, he said, of the Amir Muhammad ibn Ibrahim. In the house of the Amir Muhammad ibn Ibrahim, Akhi Ishaq ibn Ibrahim, the brother of Ishaq ibn Ibrahim. وَكَانَ فِي حَبْسٍ ضَيِّقٍ. And he said that it was severely, it was a tight place or restricted place that he was in that stable. وَمَرِيضَ فِي Ramadan. And he said he fell sick in Ramadan. ثُمَّ هُوِّلَ بَعْدَ قَلِيلًا إِلَى سِجْنِ الْعَامَةِ. So he said he fell sick in Ramadan. The day after a short while, he was moved to the general prison again. So you see he's being moved back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then he said he remained in prison for 30 shahr, for 30 months. For 30 months. And we used to come to him and he read the book of Al-Irja to me. This is what Saleh said. To me and other books while in the prison. So you see, Imam Ahmad, although he's in prison, he's not giving up. He's not sad. No. He's not saying when I'm going to get out. He's reading books to them. Like as if he's out visiting them. And same likewise, Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, when he was in prison, there was no concern for him. But when they took his writing utensils, then he said, now I'm in prison. Now I'm in prison. To the point, Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, when he ran out of space of writing, he wrote all on the walls. And then when he ran out of space on the walls, he wrote on his clothing. And the people were pulling his body out when he died in the prison. Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah. They said we were still benefiting from him by reading his clothing as he pulled him out of his cell. So these are the people behind the Sunnah. These are the people who they're not concerned with their own situation. They're still trying to benefit the ummah. Like Shaykh al-Albani, rahimahullah. He was in prison, for some of you who did not know that. Shaykh al-Albani, rahimahullah, he was not, for some time he was put out of this place, that place, he had to sleep in the desert for 6 months. And Sheikh Muhammad al-Anjari, Hafidullah Ta'ala, mentioned that he remember once when going, and this is a well-known story outside of what he mentioned, that more than 2 people could not go into the Sheikh's house, Sheikh al-Albani's house at the same time. They would not allow it. They didn't want the Sheikh to teach. They want the Sheikh to benefit the people. How many of us went through this kind of situation? We cry because people don't want to listen to what we have to say. That's nothing. Or we cry because no one is coming out to the class. This is nothing. Look at the Shuyukh, Sheikh Muhammad bin Salih Uthaymeen. When you read his biography, you'll see that there are people at one time who didn't come to his circles. They said maybe it was a few, and then it dwindled down. There was nothing left but the books of the students. No one there. This is Sheikh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah. And others, we can go on. Sheikh Muhammad bin Wahhab al-Aqil and others. We can go on. People who, Nasr al-Faqih, Medina, Sheikh Nasr al-Faqih and others who had, a few people in their study circles. And others, some, like I said, had none. But they kept pushing forth in the Tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jalla. So Imam Ahmad, as his son said, when they came, he's reading to them he said, the book Al-Irja. And then he goes on to say, in other books, while in the prison. And I saw him lead them in the prayer in chains, meaning the other inmates. رأيت يصلي بهم في قيد فكان يخرج رجله من رجله من حلقة القيد وقت صلاة والنوم. And then he said that, so I saw him lead the prayer in chains, and he would take his foot out of the main chain at the times of prayer and sleep. He would take his foot out of the main chain at the time of prayer and sleep. وقال صالح ibn Ahmad قال أبي. So then Saleh, the son of Ahmad, said, my father said, each day 2 men would come to me. One called Ahmad ibn Rabah, والآخر Abu Shu'ib al-Hajjam. So he said, every day he said that each day 2 men would come to me. One called Ahmad ibn Rabah, and the other called Abu Shu'aib al-Hajjan. They would not cease debating with me. They would not cease debating with me. He said, فَلَا يُزَالَانِ يُرَادَنَانِ. They would not cease debating with me. And when they finished, they would call for another shackle to be added to those already upon me. So when he win the debate, as he always did, as he won the debate, as soon as he finished the debate with them, they would call for another shackle to be placed on the body of Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah. So then he goes on to say, so then في رجلي أربعة أقياد. So then there were 4 chains upon my legs. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4. I mean, not 3, but 4. Could you imagine? And if anyone has ever been in chains or ever been locked up before and been in that situation, it's uncomfortable with this one. And these chains were totally different. Not like the ones now. The ones now are slightly light, like handcuffs. Really, more than handcuffs, but a little longer for the legs. He had real chains, heavy chains, 4 of them. Each time he debated with them, they added more chains to him. He said, and we're going to close up, inshallah, in a few minutes, inshallah. We're going to close up about maybe 9 to 11 minutes, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum for your patience. And please forgive me for any stuttering or anything that is not clear. So then he said, so therefore, they added the 4th. فَلَمَّا كَانَ فِي يَوْمَ الثَّلَاثَةِ. Then when they came the 3rd day, each day they would come. And when he debated with them, they put chains on his legs. He said, it came the 3rd day, and he entered and debated with me. So I said, what do you say about Allah's knowledge? So look at this. So he came to debate with Imam Ahmad. So he said, فَقُلْتُ لَهُ مَا تَقُولُ فِي عِلْمَ اللَّهِ قَالَ مَخْلُوقٌ. He said, قُلْتُ. He said, he said, then I said to him, you have disbelieved in Allah. Kuntu, I said, you have disbelieved in Allah. So he said, so when the 3rd day came, he came back to me. I said to him, Ma tuqul fi ilm Allah. What do you say about the knowledge of Allah? He said, Makhluq. He said, it's created. Kuntu, I said to him that you have disbelieved in Allah. You have disbelieved in Allah. So look, although every time he argued with them, and debate with them, they put chains upon him, but yet still, he still continued to debate, and he had no fear of, he had no compromising. He didn't water down the religion. He didn't have any tamyiz. He made a clear tamyiz, clear distinction between Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, as-Salafiyyin, and ad-Dallin, and the misguided people, Mubtadi'een, and the innovators. When he said to this man when he came upon him, he said, Ma tuqul fi ilm Allah. What do you say about the knowledge of Allah? First thing he said, the man came to the door. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't, try to, beat around the bush. No. What do you say about the knowledge of Allah? Ma tuqul fi ilm Allah. What do you say? He said, Makhluq, created. Imam Ahmad, he didn't, straight to the point. You disbelieved in Allah. You have disbelieved in Allah. And then he goes on to say that, so the messenger who used to attend, sent by Ishaq ibn Ibrahim, he said, this is a man sent by Amir al-Mu'mineen. So the leader sent him. So I said, he has committed unbelief. I said, he has committed disbelief. He has disbelieved. فَلَمَّا كَانَ فِي لَيْلَةِ الرَّابِعَةِ. So then when it came the fourth night, so you see they keep coming back and forth. He said, Ishaq, right? I'm sorry, when it came the fourth night, then he said, then on the fourth night, Mu'tasim, because Ma'mun had died, now he's Mu'tasim, he had ordered that Ishaq Ibrahim was to come. That Ishaq Ibrahim was to convey to him. So I was instant upon Ishaq. He said, Ya Abu Abdullah, O son of Abdullah. He said, it is your life that you are to lose. So now he's threatening him with losing his life. That, in other words, if you don't give up, you're going to lose your life. You're going to lose your life. And he said, and he will not kill you, be safe with the sword. He will not kill you with the sword. He desires, if you do not consent, do not agree, that he will lash you continually. He will lash you, and he will lash you continually. He will lash you continually. He will beat you, beating after beating. And then he will kill you in a place where you will neither see the sun nor the moon. In a place you never see the sun, لا يرى فيه شمس ولا قمر. You will not see the sun nor the moon. أليس قد قال الله تعالى. So now they're trying to bring their arguments to convince them to give it up. جعلناه قرآنا عربيا. Have you not seen that Allah said, verily we have made it a Quran in Arabic? أفيكون مجعولا إلا ما خلوق. So he said, so can something be which is made but anything that is created? So because Allah said, جعلناه قرآنا عربيا, we have made it a Quran in Arabic. So he said, have you not seen that something that is made is created? So they're using the book of Allah. This is why this is why the belief of Ahl Sunnah is that an adillah or dalil, an evidence or evidences from the kitab or the sunnah. The evidence is not sufficient enough except with a proper understanding. Because as Imam Shafi'i used to say, that an innovator brings evidences. So here they bring evidence from the Quran. We say clearly to Imam Ahmad, trying to argue with him, let him know, look, don't let this man kill you. Don't let him beat you and beat you and beat you, then kill you in a place you will never see the sun nor the moon. Alaysa qad qala Allah Ta'ala, Inna ja'alnahu Qur'anan Arabiyan. He said that, didn't Allah say, indeed we made the Quran in Arabic? So here he says, so something that is made, is it not created? If Allah said he made it, that means it's created. So what Imam Ahmad said, he said, oh, you got a point there. You got a point there. No, we don't say that to the people of Bid'ah. We don't say that to the people of Bid'ah. No, he didn't say that. He said to him, so okay, so I said to him, that Allah the Most High said, فَجَعَلَّهُمْ كَأَسْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ. So then he recited Surah Al-Fil, and made them like an empty field of stalks. So then he goes on to say, did not Allah create that? Did he create them like that? So then he remained silent. فَسَكَتْ, meaning that, it's how he remained silent. And then we came to the place known as the gate of the garden. Bibab al-Bastan. And he said, then I was taken out and placed upon a riding beast. Upon a riding beast. And he said, upon chains, with chains, upon a rod beast with chains. There was nobody there to hold me. So more than once I nearly fell off upon my face due to the weight of the chains. Could you imagine that? He's been through one trial after another. This is the beginning. This is the beginning. One trial after another. But yet, he's still patient. We're about to close up, inshallah ta'ala, in 3 minutes. So I was brought to the home of a Mu'tasim. He got brought to his home. And he said he entered into an apartment. And then he said into a room. And then he said entered into a separate place in there. And he said, أدخلت بيتا. Then he said, then he entered into the bait. And then he said, then he entered into a separate room, and there's a door that was locked upon me, he said. And it also was this, as we already guessed already, Jawful Lamb, in the middle of the night. Always in the middle of the night. And this is a practice they do today, even in penitentiaries today. When they come and get you and escort you to the next place, your final destination, when they come to get you, the feds are coming to get you to take you from one institution to now, to meet your fate at another institution because in another state because you crossed the line or whatever it may be. They come at the middle of the night, late in the night. They don't come in the daytime. They come at the middle of the night, late in the night. When you sleep, and they wake you up. They get you out of there. And there's reasons for that. But nonetheless, he said again, they took me during the middle of the night. And then he said that, and I desired that I make wudu. So keep in mind, it was the middle of the night, and he said there was no saraj. There was no candle. Wala saraj. There was no candle. And I wished to make wudu. And I reached out my hand, he said, and I found a container of water, he said. Bi ina'in fihi ma'. A container with water. A container with water, he said. And then he said, I made wudu, and I prayed. And I prayed. Inshallah, we're going to stop here, inshallah. And then we're going to take part 4, inshallah. If Allah wills, tentatively, we're going to try to take it maybe on Yom Arba'ah on Wednesday, and if not, then next week. And hopefully we can try to finish everything up within 5 parts, inshallah, or 6 parts. And I'm skipping over a lot of it. Because it's too many pages, too much information. There's over 200 and some odd pages. And it would take, a long period of time. It's not intended to be a long-term, dars. This is, more so as a, something that, inshallah ta'ala, as a motivation, something that, we can benefit from and, encourage us more to look into the lines of the Salaf. So inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to try to finish it up in maybe 5 parts or most. So inshallah, we're going to continue next week in part 4. Continue this until we get into the next Khalifa, the next ruler. After that, which would be Al-Wathiq, which is the next one. He goes to that. He goes as the ruler to ruler. So he was in prison and tortured for a period of time. So inshallah ta'ala, we say that anything that we said of good is from Allah alone. Anything we said of mistake is from myself and the shaitan. Anything that I said that was not clear due to the mistakes of my tongue or the shortcomings of myself is from myself and from the shaitan, so please forgive me. As I mentioned, for any stuttering or anything that was not clear. If I went too fast, because sometimes especially when I get involved into the story, sometimes I talk even faster, and it may be kind of hard to comprehend what I'm saying, so please forgive me for this. But nonetheless, subhanakallahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk, qawli hadha, astaghfirullah li wa lakum. ونسأل الله توفيق الثبات. حفظكم الله من كل شر واسكنكم في سيد جناته. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.